fortunate to have with us today Bill Bonney, who is Vice President and Corporate Information Security Officer for T-Mobile. Bill Bonney is a founding father of the cybersecurity field and has been recognized by many awards at the national level and is a much sought-after speaker in my community. Bill is going to give us an opportunity to look at what cybersecurity is like in industry, what are the things he's concerned about. So I'm going to welcome Bill, and thank you very much for your time today, Bill. I know how busy you are.
It's a pleasure to be here, Barbara.
Thank you. So Bill, could you describe a little bit about your role here at T-Mobile, what it is a corporate information security officer does?
Well, the fundamental mission of my organization is to protect the company's brand by safeguarding the networks, the information, the systems that customers rely on to deliver the communication services that we provide to them. So our job is to protect, detect, and respond to threats that could disrupt that delivery of communication services.
Well, it's an awesome responsibility for a company the size of T-Mobile, Bill, with its international reach. I think a lot of our students are going to wonder how you prepared yourself for this position. How did you get here? What were the steps you took?
Wow. Well, it's been a long road to arrive in a position like this. I've been doing this kind of work literally for decades. My undergraduate degree started with security background, but I began my practical experience working as a military intelligence officer focused on counterintelligence. And truthfully, that background is still relevant to the challenges that I'm dealing with at the level I'm operating today. But over the course of the intervening years, I've worked in banking industry, I've worked in biotechnology, I've worked in the defense industry and engineering technologies, and immediately prior to coming to T-Mobile, I spent almost 10 years working at Motorola as the Global Chief Security Officer responsible for the full range of security risk issues for that global organization. So I've been at T-Mobile now for about 8 years, it'll be 8 years November, and it's been a very exciting time because of the challenges both in the wireless communications industry, but even more so in the changes in the cybersecurity responsibilities and the issues that consumers, customers, shareholders, and employees are aware of.
So Bill, was there any particular educational choice or program that was particularly helpful in getting you to where you are now?
Well, I would say in addition to the counterintelligence training that I had as a young military officer, I took an MBA later when I was working in the defense industry in Southern California. And that taught me to think about business risk issues using a quantitative and qualitative basis as opposed to being purely technologically focused. So I think as cyber technologies, communication technologies have become increasingly important, vital actually, to the flow of commerce, that business perspective combined with a technology perspective allows us to make better decisions and to serve our shareholders most effectively.
So in addition to your background in Intel, was there any one particular assignment after that you took that was particularly helpful in getting you to this place?
I would say surviving 10 years at Motorola was very helpful too, because it was the company that invented cell phone technology. So I was there long after they invented it, I have to admit, but still working in the cellular industry, understanding the challenges from both the handset as well as the infrastructure, because Motorola at that point had been involved with all of those, prepared me to undertake the role of supporting a company like T-Mobile more effectively.
So you've had a number of awards and recognition. The one that comes to mind is the Luminary Award that you were just given. What was that all about, Bill?
Well, it's a recognition of, basically it's a Lifetime Achievement Award for cybersecurity professionals. So other folks that have received it, for example, were Howard Schmidt, who was the original cybersecurity advisor at the national level. It recognizes, again, an ongoing level of communication and engagement and support of the development of the cybersecurity profession and industry over decades. And so it was quite rewarding to receive that award in Chicago 2 years ago.
That's terrific. So as these students are thinking through preparing themselves, do you have any specific recommendations you might make, just based on your experience?
Well, as you progress in your career, I think it's increasingly important to bring that business acumen and communication skills into the mix, along with a solid grounding in the technical fundamentals, because the folks that are most effective in dealing with the range and diversity of issues that we face as organizations today can switch between those different domains of competency and leverage the most important elements that are relevant to the problem at hand. When dealing with engineering or development staff, probably most important to have that technical grounding. When dealing with managerial staff, it's probably important to have that business acumen and the ability to articulate the issues, not in technical terms, but in what does it mean to the business? What does it mean to customers? How does this impact our brand? But can't say that any one of those is most important, because it depends where an individual's at in their career and their individual mission accountabilities within their organization.
So looking at T-Mobile and how you organize the function here, how have you put it together, Bill? I think it comes as a surprise to people as they move up the ladder that not everybody reports to you. You're managing in a very different way. So how did you structure this function?
Well, we learned a long time ago in MBA classes that there's something called the span of control. So when you have over 100 plus people in an organization, it's very difficult to have everyone directly reporting into a senior leader. So teams are organized that are focused on key domains of functional accountability. In our case, for example, we have a governance, risk, and compliance team that helps us ensure that the business operates the technologies that we utilize consistent with existing legal, regulatory, and contractual guidance. We also have a security operations team that deals with the detection and response to cyber incidents. This is where we would deal with intrusions, hacking, or disruptions of our services that are caused by cyber adversaries. We also have security design and engineering teams that support the new projects as we upgrade our technologies or replace and enhance the risk issues that could be introduced if they're not managed are very significant. So having engineering talent that can be there with the development teams, help them make the right choices to minimize the risk while still accomplishing the business objective, is where we can add additional value. We've also got relationships inside the Government Affairs Office, because increasingly the legal and regulatory dimensions of cybersecurity cross many boundaries, state, local, and federal. And so having that kind of functional expertise and direct support so our teams can make good choices helps us be effective there. And lastly, as the technologies continue to evolve rapidly, it really requires us to have a real attention to what's the emerging capabilities are, as well as emerging risk. So the Cybersecurity Technology Office helps us do that by focusing both on risk and reward. Are there new dangers that we need to be considering in our plans for the years and time ahead? Are there new solutions that would help us be more effective and more efficient in accomplishing our ongoing mission responsibilities?
So, Bill, the case that we're making in this course to the students is that while there are commonalities across all sectors, there are differences too, from military to government to industry to academia. From your perspective, what are the things that are unique to industry?
Well, again, in our case, in the case of the place I've worked during my private sector career, the shareholder value and protecting the brand of the organization become very important roles for the security organization. And that differs somewhat. If you're in a governmental entity, it's not quite the same focus area. We have to be profitable. We have to deliver the services that our customers expect, regardless of what industry segment we're in. If we take on an exorbitant amount of security and protection and impede our ability to adapt and utilize new capabilities to serve customers, then we may find ourselves irrelevant or obsolete and out of business. So you have to balance the ability to protect the organization while maintaining productivity of the organization. And that's more of an art than a science at this point. It does require judgment, experience, and a full awareness of the range of issues that could come into play at any particular set of decision points.
What about the legal and the regulatory environment that you face, Bill? What are the challenges there?
Well, again, a couple of things. First, the legal and regulatory domains typically lag the technological domains by a decade or more. What that means is there are potential risks and rewards that are present today that the law will not be decided or the regulations won't be decided for maybe as long as 10 years. And that intervening gap is a time of both opportunity and risk for organizations. If one is too aggressive in adopting new things, then you run the risk of putting things at risk that you would not like to. If you're too slow to adapt to the new capabilities or the new opportunities, then you run the risk of market obsolescence and irrelevance. So the legal and regulatory domains, in addition, there is an appropriate level of attention and concern from regulatory bodies to ensure that the consumers and the citizens of a country and of a locality are appropriately protected against criminals and other abusive behaviors. So finding, once again, that balance point is a challenge where you have to stay engaged with the legislature as well as the policymakers as well as the society as a whole, so that the risks and benefits can be appropriately weighed out. So you don't want to see a situation where it's a knee-jerk reaction of absolute shutdown and control in an effort to prevent a perceived problem that can frequently happen with, well, let's say, representative democracies, where if the public is unhappy about something, then the representatives will take action. You want to make sure that those kinds of breakdowns are avoided by having a steady progression of appropriate legal and regulatory structures that manage the risks at the societal level while enabling innovation and return on investment in the private sector.
I'd sure be interested in your comments about the threat actors that we're facing, Bill, and what that has looked like over the span of your career.
Well, I'd say, again, I started up the cybersecurity elements of my career in the 1980s, so I've been doing this a very long time. And I was actually involved with the very first iteration of computer viruses. I remember getting a call from the partners I was working with at one of the large consultancies saying, anyone know what a computer virus is? And this was the Morris worm, 1988. So I explained to them what it was, because I'd actually met Dr. Cohen when he was an undergraduate student assistant at University of Southern California. So explaining what it was and what it meant, and then seeing that emerge into the areas of microcomputers and how computer viruses and worms, the monkey and the brain virus and things like that, which again you have to go to Wikipedia to see what those were about these days. But that's where it started. I had been involved in the defense industry, worked with mainframe security back in the early 1980s, and then with the advent of microcomputers and local area networking and the rapid adoption of client-server computing, at every stage things have changed very rapidly, very dramatically. So the adversaries back then were largely hackers in the let's say the traditional or the Hollywood sense of it, kids and maybe some amateur criminals that were trying to dabble with how they might cause disruption or gain reputation and credibility. Well, those kids have now grown up, and now we're dealing with full-on cyber criminals, people that are very capable, very competent, very motivated to find ways of extracting value from organizations, whether it's government or private sector organizations. If there's something valuable and they can find a way to get it, they're motivated and capable of doing that. And back in the late 1990s, I wrote a book called Netspionage, where I was talking about the possibility that we could use the internet and network-enabled tools to create state-sponsored access to foreign government secrets or foreign company secrets. The book was not a bestseller, but it was interesting. What we predicted, though, fell far short of the reality we now see today, where cyber warfare has gone well beyond just cyber espionage. So nation-state adversaries are now able to create significant threats to critical infrastructures in nation-states around the world. So we still have nation-states, we have criminals, and now perhaps terrorists at some point, and we still have hobbyist hacktivists, folks that are motivated perhaps by ideology or by political motivations of some sort to create disruption on behalf of their cause or to bring attention to something they believe warrants broader public awareness.
So when you think about critical infrastructure, Bill, what are the threats that keep you awake at night?
Well, I think the challenge here is that critical infrastructures like power and telecommunications were built back in the time whenever the threats were largely physical and were not cyber in nature. The ongoing expectations of the private or of the citizens of a nation that these services will always be available means the competitive intensity remains very tense, and you have to stay up with those demands. But if you have the ability as a nation state to take down the critical infrastructure of an opponent over a political dispute, whether it's geopolitical or whether it's economic or social, that's a very dangerous situation. So I think that the challenge for the future is finding the right kind of public and private partnerships that will allow the appropriate levels of investment by both governments and industry to manage the kinds of real threats that could disrupt and destroy those infrastructures, which of course would disrupt profitability for the attacked organizations, but would also create potentially significant military risk to the being defeated or being delayed in responding to serious threats. So it's a very complex challenge, and the folks at the national level that have to wrestle with those challenges have a very, very difficult balancing act that they have to work through. My job is to make sure that we have an appropriate level of protections in place to deal with those things that we can prevent, detect, and respond to within the operational construct of our business models.